All right, we are now recording. So we can share that link with everybody who attended afterwards as well. So you will have the recording and you will have the Google Doc with some extra information too. All right. So Ellie and Anna and Sydney, if you like, no pressure. Can you just tell me a little bit about the newsrooms that you were placed in this summer, where you're working, and what you found most valuable about your experience?
Yeah, I can go first. So I was working at the Texas Tribune on their product team, which was really exciting. The product team at the Texas Tribune is really situated between a bunch of different areas of the newsroom. So working with editorial, with engineering, with design, which was just an invaluable experience for me, learning how to work with so many different teams that all have different communication methods and different priorities, and how to navigate those kinds of things in a newsroom was a huge learning experience within itself. But also what I worked on largely at the Texas Tribune was starting a practice of user research. So our big project was their membership program. The Texas Tribune is a nonprofit newsroom, so they take in a lot of revenue through member donations. So that's like starting at $1, anybody who donates to the Texas Tribune. So we did a large scale research project on that program and initiative. And then we also did like medium level research projects and very low level research projects, sending out surveys, doing user interviews, collecting internal information on a wide variety of things that the Texas Tribune is doing. And then at the end of the summer, I presented on what user research is and how to apply it, and the various ways of thinking about all the different tools at your disposal. So that was a really great experience. I had some really awesome mentors and supervisors who kind of uplifted me and helped me present my findings to the newsroom. So it was great.
Cool. Yeah, you got to kind of have your hands in a lot of different areas and work on some different projects. Can you talk a little bit about how this fellowship is a little bit different than maybe a typical editorial fellowship or reporting fellowship or internship?
Yeah, and I experienced that very specifically at the Texas Tribune because the Texas Tribune has such a big fellow program. So there were other reporting fellows who are going out and doing like the traditional journalism internship where you're reporting on stories and writing. And there were also some multimedia fellows, a copy editing fellow. So mine was very distinctive and different from the rest of them, where I was working with members of the senior management team, I was working with editors, I was working with designers, and a lot of what I was doing was tapped into the larger organization mission. And I did not touch editorial or reporting or anything like that. So that does exist within the journalism space, but there aren't a lot of internship programs for that. And so the RJI Innovation Fellowship was like the only opportunity I could find to do work within journalism that wasn't necessarily reporting at this stage in my career. And to do it at the Texas Tribune was a fantastic experience.
Cool. Thanks, Anna. Ellie, you want to talk a little bit about where you were and what you were doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a data visuals reporter in Sacramento. I have a background in a lot of different visuals, but I started getting into data, and it just so happened that that was kind of a gap in their newsroom, and they needed some help with that. So I worked on a bunch of different projects, a lot of daily stuff, but then also some longer form animation, information graphic design. So yeah, it was really fantastic. I got a lot of wide-ranging editorial experiences. I was also encouraged to write. So it was really good for me to expand my skills.
Cool. Thank you. And you can, if any of you subscribe to the Innovation and Focus newsletter, we'll be featuring Ellie's piece where she wrote about creating an animation around induction ovens and woks. And it's very interesting and enlightening, like how reading about Ellie's process. And so you can find that in the newsletter next month. So let's see, anything else? So I know we talked a little bit about how different newsrooms, like different types of newsrooms, different sizes of newsrooms can still be like provide distinct experiences for the innovation fellows. So what did you like about working in the newsrooms where you were at? And what would you want like newsrooms to know or news organizations to know about the fellowship before applying?
I can jump in. And just one of the things that was really great about this fellowship program is that there were lots of other fellows and we meet like twice a month. And one of the things that came across in those conversations to me was how different our experiences were based on just the newsroom structure. And so for me at the Texas Tribune is a very large, very established newsroom with a lot of like management, with a lot of different team leads. And so my experience pitching things or starting projects took a little bit more navigating than it necessarily took for one of the other fellows who might have been in a smaller newsroom. So it's just totally different like newsroom politics experiences based on where we were at. And also for me, I had a larger amount of resources. My work at the Texas Tribune intersected a lot with the News Revenue Hub's work, which is another external organization. So I got the experience of like working with a different team coming onto the newsroom at the same time, which was really interesting. And I think for newsrooms that are applying for this fellowship, I think that my work was most helpful at the Texas Tribune, like filling a hole for that short-term period. Like my supervisor isolated the membership research that they wanted to do and knew that their full-time staff was not going to have the capacity to do a ton of user interviews and really dig into this, and saw the opportunity for a fellow to come in for 3 months and really just like dig into this need that the Tribune had and set them up for continued user research going forward. So I think for newsrooms who are looking to find a fellow, no matter what size you are, like find the hole that can be kind of filled in the short term, or an area that you'd like to innovate on or develop, and then have a fellow come in for like 3 months and set you up to continue doing it. I think that of all the work that I did at the Texas Tribune, that the membership project was the most helpful for the long term because they had isolated that area.
Yeah, that can be a challenge because news organizations are applying in October or in November, October, November-ish, and they need to identify a project or an area that they want that fellow to work on. And as we know, things change so quickly in newsrooms. And so by the time next summer comes around, they may have a different need. So that is something to think about if you are in a news organization that is interested in this program, trying to think about, like Anna said, what areas a fellow could help you, especially if it's something that is newer that you just don't have the capacity to try yet because you don't have the time or resources right now, like something that you can kind of set aside for that time, or just a general idea of what you think that fellow will work on. Because I know a lot of the fellows said that they also appreciated having an idea of what they would be working on as well. So yeah, just something to think about. Ellie, what was the question? What would you want newsrooms to know about working in the working with a student innovation fellow and yeah, what was your experience?
Yeah, I would absolutely echo some of what Anna said of I was also in a fairly large internship program, and oftentimes, like, depending on where a news organization recruits their interns from, there can be like a level of separation. I was really lucky to not experience that. So I was, despite being an RJI fellow, I was really counted as part of the Sacramento Bee intern class. So I think just from like a social standpoint of this is like a learning experience for the fellow themselves, that was fantastic. But yeah, I kind of had that same problem of, I connected with my mentor, I connected with the newsroom in February, and we had kind of a difficult conversation of it's going to be really hard for us to predict coverage needs in June for, when you're in February. So that was something that was a little bit tricky, and is, especially hard in an editorial space of you just can't possibly know what the news will be 3 months out. So one thing that was really, really handy for my newsroom was my mentor made the space and made the time to see what I was interested in and what I was good at. So data visuals was obviously the position that I was in, but I have a lot of background with motion graphics and animation. And so there was the opportunity for me to step into that. And he, knowing that, was able to find projects for me and look at some of the coverage that might benefit from information graphics and animation. So that was really, really, really good. I would say one of my tips for a newsroom that's looking for a fellow is, you have this project that you're pitching in November. But in addition to that, you're going to get an individual who has a lot of interest, maybe beyond the project that you're pitching. And so just kind of be aware of, like, a lot of my time was filled doing daily stuff, but I got to do some things that I was really, really, really interested in and passionate about. So yeah, that would be my tip.
Great. That's super helpful. Also, I see a question here, and I know Kat's addressing it. Is there a minimum size for newsrooms? No, there is not. So as you heard Ellie and Anna talk about their newsrooms, they worked in larger newsrooms. And there were also people in our cohort that worked with very small newsrooms, like teams of 2 to 3 people. So I know there's different benefits to having both. And so we do consider all sizes. We tend to, just because of who our JI is, we tend to work with community-based newsrooms or community-driven newsrooms, but it's not limited by size. So hopefully that helps answer your question. I also want to introduce Emily Hood. She just popped on. So she was another Student Innovation Fellow this summer. Emily, do you mind just talking a little bit about where you were and what your experience was like, and if there's anything that you'd want people to know about the fellowship from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. I just came from a class here, so I'm a little late. But my experience with the fellowship was absolutely wonderful. I was at the Star Tribune in Minneapolis, doing a very product-focused internship. And so we developed 2 internal newsroom tools to help as the Star Tribune really thinks about what a digital-first model looks like, both in terms of their newsroom and their business as well. And so I built a Slack bot that generates analytics reports for stories. And so users can input a story and it'll spit out how many page views they got, their average engaged time, as well as the traffic source from a story. And it also puts things in context of how those metrics compare to the rest of the newsroom, help the newsroom start thinking about what the decisions that they're making, how that translates into the analytics and the performance of the newsroom as a whole. The other guide that we built was a best practices guide for service journalism, and specifically helping some of their reporters get through maybe a habit of building traditional narrative print newspaper stories into something that's a little bit more digitally focused and helps with search traffic. So those were the 2 projects I got. It was really fantastic. I'm a senior here at the university. To get that kind of experience as an intern, I find that's very uncommon in the industry, to be able to work on projects that aren't necessarily traditional reporting projects, but really touch on a lot of different aspects of the newsroom and touch on not only the newsroom side, but also the business side. And one thing that was really helpful is that I was really impressed by the Star Tribune's plan that they had for me. They gave me projects that, were pretty in-depth and required me to talk to a lot of different aspects of the organization, but they weren't projects, I'm 21. I wasn't setting the long-term digital strategy of a newspaper of that size, of a newsroom with 200 people. It was projects that were relatively contained, that were low stakes if we ran into issues as we were launching them. And they also did a wonderful job of really structuring out my 12 weeks to help for interns at this stage in our college career, help us understand how to project manage and make sure that we're staying on the right track. So I think that would be my biggest advice, because that was something that really made my fellowship great.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. The other part of this that some of the students have mentioned already is mentorship. So every student is paired with a mentor at their news organization, and that is a big part of this fellowship experience. Because like they said, it's a lot of brainstorming. Students may be pitching ideas, and they're looking for areas to grow. And that mentor can help a lot with both finding ways that these student fellows can fill gaps, like Anna said, and supporting that innovation fellow in doing their work and setting timelines and all that. So Emily, I know you had a good mentorship experience. Can you talk a little bit about like what made that mentor-mentee relationship a positive one for you?
Yeah, absolutely. My mentor for the fellowship was Frank B., who's the director of tools and technology at the Star Tribune. And Frank was fantastic. And he really helped me for a few reasons. The first thing he did, as soon as I got there, I mentioned structuring out the entire fellowship. And so he said, I did some brown bag presentations to the entire newsroom. And so I spent the first 3 weeks of my fellowship set up by Frank, just talking to as many people as possible. I did a final count. I think I did 37 one-on-one conversations with people. And that was really helpful under the guidance of Frank to understand kind of the environment that I was coming into. I'd only been to Minnesota once for a weekend before I did this fellowship. So I had a lot to get up to speed on really quickly. And Frank was also really helpful in that regard as somebody who could point me in the right direction of who to talk to and who could be my allies in the newsroom. As you know, there were people who were really, really passionate about helping this digital first transition. And Frank was really useful in pointing me in the direction of those people. Not only people who could be advocates for my project, but could also help fill knowledge gaps that maybe he wasn't able to fill himself. A lot of our Slackbot project, I have a minor in computer science. It was a lot of coding. There was still a lot that I had to get up to speed on in 12 weeks. And thankfully, the Star Tribune had a really wonderful team of coders and developers who was able to help walk me through that entire project. And that was all, facilitated by Frank. The last thing he did that was very useful is we just had weekly meetings, weekly check-ins. Usually they were about 30 minutes to an hour. And it was a place where I could go if I was feeling either confusion about my projects or confusion about the organization, if I was running into issues with stakeholders, as that can be kind of a stakeholder management can be a complicated thing to learn at this age and at this type of internship. And so it really gave me a place where I could get his feedback on things as somebody who knew the organization a little bit better than I did.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. Yeah, and if anybody else if people attending or people have questions about the fellowship in general, about the mentors, about anything else, one, you can still put things in the doc and in the chat, or feel free to reach out to me. My email is on the top of this Google Doc, so I'm happy to talk. And I know these fellows are happy to answer questions as well, and I can connect you with them. They're all nodding, so thank you. Let's see. I don't see any other questions in the doc. I don't see anything in the chat. Ellie, Anna, or Emily, do you have any remaining lingering thoughts? Anything that you want people to know about the fellowship? I'm opening it up to you in case there's anything else.
I don't think so. I don't have anything else to add.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining. Like I said, if anybody has any questions, the deadlines are here, and the links are all in this doc as well. But please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk through the program anymore, or connect you with fellows. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. And you can see at the bottom of here, we also have some upcoming programs and ways to keep in touch with RJI. So a big one is our student innovation competition. Applications are now open for our student innovation competition. So this is open to anybody, not just Mizzou students. So if you know any students that are interested, please pass along that information. This year, it's all about community impact tracking. And so there's a link there with some more information. But that deadline is October 16th. And then I have, like I said, the newsletter linked there. And we also have a pretty new GitHub page that is a one-stop shop kind of for RJI's innovation team, where you can really see clearly what all of our programs are, from our RJI fellows to the partnership projects that we do to innovation and focus. And so that's a great place to kind of check out what we're doing as well. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thanks again for joining, and have a great rest of your Monday.